This video is proudly sponsored by DigimonCard.io for all your Digimon card, deck building, deck list, card pricing, and discussion needs. Hey everyone, Egman here with another video, and today we have a double feature, two different top 16 breakdowns for the two Ultimate Cups that happened in this past weekend. We had the Top Cut North American Webcam Ultimate Cup, as well as the Oceania Webcam Ultimate Cup as well. And both of them are using the BT11 format, which means that you do have to have the restrictions there, as well as the card legality of only having monocolored lists there. And all these lists are going to be on my website too, which are linked in the description as well. And just big thanks to both TAC and Top Cut for helping me get these lists together. I wouldn't have been able to make this video without them, as well as for Top Cut specifically for letting me do the live stream for it. It was a lot of fun. I saw a lot of cool matches for it, and the VOD is still on my Twitch, which is linked in the description as well as on this website, and it will be re-uploaded to my YouTube by the end of the week as well. So that is kind of the goal and plan there, but we're just going to go over these very quickly. We're kind of do like the combined archetype, so just kind of like the top placing archetype between the two events, and just kind of go through this as well. I wanted to make two videos, but I really didn't have the time, so we're doing this kind of combined one as well. So going over quickly the Top Cut one, we did have 7 Bloom, 3 Blue Flare, 2 Ulforce, 2 Gallant, a Black War Grey X, and a Dorbick. And I want to say like this, Bloomlord was pretty popular for both events, 7 out of 16 for both of them in their top 16s, which is quite a bit. Honestly, like a little bit worrisome, but we'll talk about that in a little bit. Blue Flare, which is really interesting, which didn't top at all in Australia either. 2 All-Force Gallant, Black War Grey X, and Dorbick. So kind of like a lot of these kind of red aggressive decks. And honestly, like as much as like I know a lot of people don't like Black War Grey X, and I know it's getting the ban update by the end of the month, or at least the 1st of April. There's a lot of weird and kind of creative ways to build it in this format, which I think is really neat. And then on the other side, we do have again 7 Bloom, 2 Black War Grey X, 2 Merva loops, which kind of swap places with Blue Flare between the two events, and then a Dorbick of their own, Gallant, All-Force, Machinedramon, and Dark Knight. So Machinedramon, Dark Knight also unique to this top 16 as well. But man, just a lot of Bloomlord over here. And I do kind of want to mention two things. One, just shout outs to Digiburst, who reached out to me and got second for this event. I'm going to be covering the North American first place just because it was a first place list, but make sure to check out their YouTube channel as well, especially since they are from Australia and I want to support content creators out there as well. Make sure to hit that link there and hit that subscribe on there. A lot of content for Digimon. I don't think you regret that either. But there's also this weird Black War Greymon. It's not Black War Greymon X Dorbick. We're going to show it towards the top of it, but it's a really interesting list here, and I do want to kind of make a note of that one as well. But we're going to jump into the top placing archetypes, starting with the first place list here in North America. This is Sam Zhao's first place Bloomlord. And before we get too into it, I do want to mention that for half of these Bloomlord lists, I had to hand input into DigimonCard.io. So by the end of it, I was pretty aware on how a lot of these ratios kind of panned out for it. And honestly, a lot of it was pretty the same. Honestly, if I was to guess, I would say most of these decks were probably like 80% of the same cards and ratios when it comes down to it. Most of them are running 4 Palmon, 2 Terriermons, the 2-4 split between the Palmomons, some Weedmons, some of the Sunflower, 4 of these, 4 Red Veggie, and Argomon are Blosso between one of these. You have 3 of these, and then 2 Cherries, 4 Agitars, one had like 3 of them, and then 3 Hydras and 4 of the Bloomlords. Like, that's how you build this deck more times than not. That's how a lot of people built them for these events. And pretty much you do have some room for tech cards, don't get me wrong, but it's pretty much understood like the base of this deck is like the hard ratios for it. And even though like it is a little bit understood on the deck building, I will say that there's a lot of room to misplay with this deck too. You do have to be really aware on how all of the triggers interact and how to interact with your opponent as well. So it's not, I don't think it's a deck that necessarily is like an autopilot in a lot of ways. You do have to make sure you sequence and find everything in the right orders. But at the same time, we are seeing such a dominance in this meta. And honestly, if I was to say something and make a suggestion for future Ultimate Cups, and if this ever changes, which I don't think it was, just make this card 0. Make Hidden Potential Discovered also at 0. If we're making our own little fancy ban list, just put this to 0. This just makes you win all the time. Like anytime I saw one of these decks this weekend use Hidden Potential Discovered, you either won or you lost because your opponent also used Hidden Potential Discovered. It's just such a strong card in this matchup, and I don't, and it's just kind of like this small little meta, I think this card kind of deserves to be down to 0. And if I would like to see that if that has a possibility for it. So other than that, I think the deck is strong. Obviously, it was doing okay in like the real BT11 format. So being able to be in the special format where it doesn't have to contend with, I think, as much powerful decks, and it has more time to kind of set up because the meta is a little bit slower. I think it's pretty clear this is the most powerful deck in the format. So congrats to Sam there for their first place finish with this list here. And then next up, we do have the first place list for the Oceania event. So this is Ryan Bews, first place, Black War Greymon X, and this is going off the black Digi Eggs. You'll see, we have a couple other decks that kind of relate to this that are following up, but pretty much you have the decision between going the black and red route for a bunch of these. There are some decision points, and there are some cards that are mono one color that you really miss out on. For example, for the black version, I think you're a little bit more defensive by and large. That's mostly because you're also running the Greymon. You can run the blocker if you need to, being able to kind of go up your chains there. Also running 4 Deltamon, really interesting. And if anyone's missing out on the cost reduction for Greymon X, Deltamon can kind of do that same reduction for you too. It's kind of nice, but like being able to use the metal gray to get your effects off, and like really focusing on the Gallantmon and also the Black War Greymon too, which you can use to kind of reduce the evolutions into Gallantmon or get like more sources and stuff. So I like that idea for the deck. You're running 1 Hades Force, which is nice. There's not as much like tamer stuff going on, so I think 1 is warranted for it. And then running the Yuya as well as the Maki Tamers, which can also help you do some cost reductions. Nothing as crazy as Cool Boy, especially because this card costs 3 and not 2. But very, very strong to help you kind of go up your chains and kind of keep your turn. So obviously, I think the only thing that's missing from a deck like this is that it doesn't have a level 7 to help you kind of close the game or get something like a closer with that. But regardless, I think the deck is very strong. And so this is kind of how you build based on a black base. And then we also have a red base. So this is Brian's 4th place list here in North America. So you see that they chose to do the red base here. And we'll get to the end part real quick, but looking at this one, kind of what you normally kind of see, but you will see some more spice when you go towards the end of it. But you can still run Greymon X in here. You can both of them. So obviously you tech in like one version of this, and then you kind of go up your chain. You can do the Metal Greymon Ulforce mode as well for just another level 5, which can help you on your stacks if you need to. And then Gallantmon, the Black War Greymon X, and also the Dorbick and the Ragnarlordmon, which is really interesting. So the reason you're doing this, because you can just make all of these are level 6s that are red and black, which means they can be used for the black one. And when Digivolving, you get 2 Blitz, and when DNA Digivolving, for every 4 cards in your opponent's Devolution, or in this card's Devolution cards, delete one of your opponent's Digimon with play cost of 20 or less, and then trash the top card of your opponent's security stack. So in all turns, when a card is removed from a player's security stack, you get to unsuspend this Digimon. So very, very strong for that effect there. And obviously you can like make a Dorbick and go into it, but you've just seen so many games where like you're sitting on like 1 stack of Black War Greymon. If you can build another one in raising and then kind of go into this, it's kind of like an interesting like alternate win condition too. So very strong in that regards, and I think it can help close out some of these closer matchups. And honestly, I wasn't able to see like the full kind of cheese in a lot of this, but I think the deck is strong. It's a really creative way to make it in red too. I like the Yule, which can help you with some 3k destruction, which is nice. The Redman boost the Fireball, and then also we have a bunch of like 1s and 2s of just cards that can also go underneath the Dorbick if you need to. So I think this deck's really neat, and congrats again to Brian for their finish there. And then we're kind of go into this one. So this is Hung Nguyen's 6th place Black War Grey, not Black War Grey X. It's kind of like a split between like the Black War Greymon and, spoilers, what we're going to search at the Dorbick on the other side. But this is a really interesting build too. So kind of same thing, you build up into your regular stacks. I mean, Metal Greymon's still a really great card. It's very good at disrupting your opponent and getting a lot of kind of benefits from there. So there's that. We're not running the Black War Grey at all. We're just running the Greymon X and the Greymon here. And then we can go into our Black War Greymon and get into a Gallantmon, but also the Dorbick with 2 Ragnas as well. So really great for this as well. And there's also this Flamedramon, which you can use for the DNA. So it's kind of like the Gatomon. So inheritive at the end of your turn, this Digimon and one of your other Digimon may DNA Digivolve into a Digimon card from your hand for the cost. So even if you have to hard cast the Dorbickmon and go over to your opponent's turn, you can go into Ragna and do some silly things there too. So especially since you get to DNA with some big stacks, you get a lot of sources underneath. It's a neat little combo and can do a lot of damage if you're not playing around it, which is kind of neat. So and it's really nice to see like there is some like DNA devolution going on in this format, despite it being kind of a mono color format, which I think is really neat in its own regard too. So not much more to say about this one except for congrats to Nguyen on this win. It's really interesting to see this deck, and then to kind of just finalize the loop from going from like Black War Greymon, like the black based, all the way to a Dorbickmon kind of regular build there. We do have Luke Dixon's third place Dorbick, again from Oceania. So this is pretty similar. A lot of these builds are pretty... you have your own one-ofs that you like to add to the deck. I'd say like the generic is that you run 4 of the X-Antis and 4 of the Gilmons, and then one or two Agus, since all of these can go under, and then for the Digimon effect as well. And then you just play your favorite inheritables for this. So that can include Security Attack +1 off of this card, off of the Volcanic, off the Master Tyrannomon. So running 9 of these comparatively just means that your Dorbick's going to do a lot of potential damage there. 2 Delicate Plans as well as Heir of the Dragons instead of using the Hero of the Sky. So draw 2 cards, then if your opponent has Greymon in his name, you get to delete something with 4K. So kind of like a better Fireball. It does cost 1. You have to have a Dramon out though, or something with Greymon in its name, which isn't impossible, but a little bit less flexible, I think, than Heroes in the Sky. So an interesting choice there. And then also it has a Gallant X if you want to just like go and win the game, I suppose. Very interesting, because it's when Digivolving, you get to delete something and then when attacking afterwards, which is hard to do, but also I think this is a kind of hard card to remove if you're able to kind of clear the board when you do it. So and then some Tamers, Tai, we have Hero, we also have Tai and Kari, which is interesting too. Being able to kind of help you get more memory to start your turn, I think is good there too. So not much more to say. The only thing is I know a lot of this is kind of uninteractable. A lot of the time they just play their boy and then they attack and you're at 0 security. So that is a little bit scary, but I also think that this is a good meta call too, because a lot of decks are going a little bit slower and kind of taking their time to set up their stuff. And so if you're just able to kind of go into this as fast as you can and do a lot of damage, a lot of decks can't kind of compare to that. So especially with not as many security control options available or being used right now in general. So congrats to Luke on their third place finish. And next up we have, this is Andrew Lynn's 4th place Gallantmon. So another Oceania list here. And we had a lot of Gallantmon in both events too. A lot of people trying to play into it. And most of these looked moderately similar. Like a lot of this is just you have to run up the archetype. There's a lot of cards that are just specifically for the archetype, and just a little bit of wiggle room. So Gilmons in the low end, you have 12, including the X antibody. You're choosing the top 3 off the EX2, as well as the one from Sardex 7 to go into a level 6 if your opponent has one sitting out. Then we have our Growlmons. The memory gain from this is great. The deletion from this is great. And then this is just the X antibody, which is good for some more additional cycle. Going into the War Growl as well, being able to play a Tamer off this is huge. War Growl X is great. The only thing is that it has to be played on top of one of the War Growls specifically, since X antibody isn't in here. And then a 3-3 split between the Crimson and the Gallant and the Gallant X, which I think is a good ratio layout there. 4 Mem Boost, 2 of the Heroes, 4 of the Takatos, and that's kind of it. So only thing I will say about this deck is that it's really, really linear, and though you do have more time to kind of set up and do your big attack if you need to, you do have to worry that you don't have a lot of recovery. You don't have any defensive. The only defense for this is just destruction. There's no blocker, no redirect, no recovery, no nothing. So you have to just go for it every time, and sometimes you get there, and it works out. So congrats to Andrew on their 4th place finish there. And then next up we have Ari with their 5th place Merva loop as well. Most of these lists are from Oceania for this like middle part, so we do have some top cut ones coming up anyways. But I really do like the Merva loop, and this is just kind of coming off of I did my advanced structure deck day the other day as well, and I ran Merva, and honestly most of the people at that event were running Merva. It was pretty funny to see, but there's a lot of great accessibility for this deck to just do a lot of crazy things, and I think it's really neat as a concept too. Running both the Ginkuamon and the Eismon it's very tricky to fit all these in. but they do a good job going for it. The one card that I missed from my build that I think is great is the Skullgreymon. So when this card is trashed in your hand using one of your effects, you replace it under one of your purple Digimon, its bottom devolution cards, and then it just means it has retaliation. And also when attacking, you can trash one card in your hand to get this plus 3k DP. But using this effect to give something retaliation is fantastic because it means that you can use the effects off the Merva or off of the... or just, yeah, pretty much Merva, which means you get to put it underneath it. And since it has retaliation, it just means that you get like the rush or the blocker, and getting a retail blocker, I think, is very strong in this game still. So other than that, you just have a lot of cycle cards, a lot of cards to help you find your pieces, as well as delete your own cards to help get your own effects when you need them to happen. So honestly, I really like this deck. I need to invest into it a little bit more. I think it's a lot. It's very complicated for what it is, but you feel like you're doing a lot of interaction, you feel like you're doing some plays, and sometimes you do just lose and you kind of brick because you do have to run a lot of these level 6s, but when you go off and you're able to find the combo that makes sense and go for it, it feels really good at the same time. So congrats again to Ari for their finish. And next up we have Jeffrey Ramirez, 6th place Blue Flare, and Blue Flare's kind of entered the format a little bit. It's probably one of the better blue decks in the format, at least right now. A lot of people were playing at the Top Cut event. I saw a lot of people playing this deck and trying to do well with it. A lot of them did for it, and honestly, I think the support that it did get in the set, and like Greymon is just like a really good finisher for this deck too. It's kind of like a level 7 Omni Blitz in a lot of ways, and the fact that this deck doesn't interact, it doesn't matter on the board as much. As long as you keep their tamers around, you can always just do Metal Grays to do the Digicross, get the stuns and get some attacks, and you can just go from like nothing to be able to do that as long as you can kind of consistently get to 3 memory, which isn't too hard for this deck to do either. And Sword Zhou is great too, especially since level 7s don't really exist. It means you really get to stun out a lot of level 6s and get a lot of memory and just kind of mess with a lot of your opponent's sources a lot of the time too. So I think Blue Flare is in a really good spot. I think that it's probably a little bit better than it is in the regular format as well, as much as I miss the triple tamer to help us more sources and get more cycle for it. I think Sword Zhou is also just really helpful for what we have right now. And I know this deck is also really obnoxious, and it really reminds me a lot of like how Blue Hybrid used to play in a lot of ways, where you kind of, they can just do a lot of stuff from nothing, and this deck can totally do the same thing. You could have an empty board, but if you give them 3 memory, they can go into their Metal Gray, get like a triple stun, get 2 attacks, set up the board, and then you're almost like just dead the next turn, which is crazy. So congrats again to Jeffrey for their finish there with this deck. We have 3 more to go over. We do have Martin Lee's 10th place Ulforce, and I think Ulforce, a lot of people thought was going to be the best blue deck going into this format. I think it's pretty good. Don't get me wrong. I think it's a really strong deck for what it is, and it definitely can top. I think Martin's also like a really, really silly player when it comes to this. He's running only 5 level 5s, by the way, which is a little bit silly. It's a little bit low for what you want. I'd want at least 6 if I want to go into my old forces more realistically, but it's a very, very strong deck, again, when it goes off. If you are able to make your chain, it is just your turn for forever. It feels like you just keep going off. You're able to get your tamers. You're able to build the board. And when you're not really punished in the game, at least the Ultimate Cup format, for having a lot of tamers out, this deck is very, very happy for what it is. So again, this is the Mulligan format, so you do get to search a little bit more for your cards. And I think it's just in a really good spot overall. It does have weaknesses, though. I don't think it's necessarily any way like the best deck in the format, but it's just very strong. I know a lot of people are playing it. I think a lot of people are also kind of not playing it because I know this arena is still really expensive for what it is. A card that's only good for one archetype, but I think the deck is good, and people who can master it can probably do very, very well with it. So congrats again to Martin on their finish, and we have Jason with Machinedramon. And I honestly, I hoped that Machinedramon did a little bit better this weekend than it did. It did get this top with Jason, and I honestly, like, Kaustinen is such a good card in this format. It has protection for bouncing, deleting, so bouncing to hand, bouncing to deck, or just deletion. And since Chaos Degradation doesn't really exist in this format either, you don't have to worry about that card. Like, this can just set up, and then if your opponent doesn't have a way around this card, you just win. You just win every game. Like, it's just silly how good this card can be at locking in a lot of decks. So some decks do have ways to get around it, and it doesn't have infinite protection either. If you keep putting sources, get rid of it, you can. But Machinedramon being able to have more time to recover and kind of set up in this format, I would expect it to do a little bit better than it is. But still a top 16 finish is fantastic, and we're going to see if we see more of them. This is also nice to see like a deck that's very kind of cookie cutter, where you're like, all right, choose your favorite level 5s, go for it, find the cards that really work out for you, and I think overall it's a very, very interesting deck. So again, congrats to Jason on their finish there. And then lastly, we do have Bryce's 14th place DarkKnightmon. And I've said this before, and I said this in other breakdowns, that I think DarkKnightmon is my favorite deck in this format that I'd want to play. I really like all the interactions with it. I like how the deck works, and I like being able to kind of shuffle my pieces around. Honestly, DarkKnightmon itself, this BT10 card, I think is one of the best cards in this format. Being able to de-digivolve for 4 essentially and build a body, and if they try to delete this body, you still get a body back to recycle. Like, it's just, there's a lot going on for this guy, and I think it's fantastic for what it is, and there's just a lot going on. So I think the deck is very strong. I think the recursion is great. The fact that you also have like in archetype Tamer Destruction too, which can delete your own Tamers, which is weird, but don't worry, it makes sense a lot of the time. But I think there's a lot going on for this deck, and I'm really happy to see that it got another top 16 finish this weekend as well. So big congrats to Bryce on their finish, and that is going to be my breakdown for you guys today. Again, a little bit quicker, but I did want to go over both events while I still could. It's going to be a busy couple of weeks for me, so I wanted to make sure I space out content correctly, and I think the double breakdown was the way to go. But again, congrats to literally all of our top 16s for both events. And again, thank you so much to Top Cut for letting me do the stream. It was really fun doing that, and seeing most of these decks in action is really cool at the same time as well. But that's going to be it for me. Thank you guys so much for watching. I really do appreciate it. Make sure to check out Egman events, and I'll catch you all next time.